Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you once again by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the cartoonist behind last year's exceptional graphic novel, Sheets. It's Brenna Thummler. Thanks for coming on, Brenna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we're going to get into Sheets a whole lot later on, but I want to go back. A lot of times when I have a person on for the first time, I'll go back to like the beginning of like the world of comics for you. But for you, it's actually really not that far back, which is one of the most interesting things that I learned when I was researching stuff. But I actually want to start with your art school experience, because that's kind of where like the foundation of Sheets started. You went to Ringling College of Art and Design. What did you go there to study?
I studied illustration. That's what I have my BFA in. So I graduated in 2015 with that degree.
So I know your affinity for comics didn't come until later. Like with that degree of in illustration, like what did you go in hoping to do with that degree in illustration? Did you have a plan for that?
I honestly had very few plans. I mean, going into art school, I just knew that I really loved to draw. And that came from a program that I did back in high school. It was a 2-year program through our vocational center. So like you would go half day every day in your junior and senior year of high school and study art. And I actually went into that program thinking that I would get into graphic design, and knowing that it was called a commercial art program, I figured it would be a lot more graphic design, but it turned out to be a ton of drawing and learning about value and color. And that's when I learned how much I love to draw.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interest in illustration came from that program. And then I guess my goal for art school was obviously to find out what I wanted to do, because I knew that we would be introduced to a lot of different options. But even by my senior year of college, maybe I was leaning towards maybe editorial work.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment where I kind of was thinking about working in greeting cards. Like Hallmark was kind of the thing that determined you were successful at college. Like everyone kind of strived to work at a place like Hallmark, and so a lot of the time was kind of working towards that, because I thought that would mean success for me. And then of course I've always loved books and storytelling, so I thought maybe just getting into book covers or maybe interior illustrations, but I never once considered graphic novels or pencil art of any kind. I was completely against ever getting into the comics industry.
That's the amazing thing. It's like you went in and you never even considered it. That was not on your list of options, but it really, from what I understand, is basically like you had, like, not to make it seem like a bigger deal than it was, but you had like a fateful discovery of Jillian and Mariko Tamaki's This One Summer in 2015 that like basically opened up what comics could be to you. Like, what was it about that book that you connected so much with, and like it made you really appreciate what comics could be?
Oh man, well the art itself is beautiful. I was in a thrift store and I was browsing this enormous bookshelf. I mean, it took up like the entire aisle, this long aisle of books, and the binding caught my eye, mostly because of the little binding illustration and
of the girl on the bike.
Of course, yeah. And so I pulled it out. I'm like, oh, this is a really awesome cover. And I opened it up and I said, oh, a graphic novel. I probably won't like this. But just thumbing through the pages, it was so breathtakingly beautiful. The illustrations were unbelievable. And it was very cheap. Being in a thrift store, I was like, oh, I'll just get it and take it home and see what it's like. And I instantly fell in love. I mean, I tend to really enjoy stories, whether it be in a book format or even like in the films, that are very subtle, and really not much happens. Like I like some kind of slice of life stories where it's just a character or two, and you are experiencing their life, and it's more character driven rather than an epic tale involving a lot of conflict or adventure. So I really liked how quiet and calming the story was. Even though there was conflict, it was just very subdued.
Hmm.
And I mean, really, I can't talk much more other than the illustrations. I mean, I was just completely blown away by Jillian Tamaki's work. Um, and the fact that it was not a superhero story, which is kind of, I guess, what I had thought comics mostly were like action and adventure sort of stories. So this was just a young girl on her, like, by the lake with her family. And um, so it really made me realize that comics could be for anyone. I mean, there are so many different audiences, and that if I ever got involved, like I wouldn't have to take the route that I thought comics were. I could write for people who enjoyed stories that were more subtle, or for audiences that I didn't expect them to be for.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is. There's always something I think that kind of recontextualize that because I grew up reading superhero comics, but it was things like Jeff Smith's Bone, and then like Preacher, which is like a Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon comic. Like those two, I had always thought that like comics were just superheroes. That was like the flavor they came in. But once you find that, it's like it opens this entirely different world up. And I have to say, like what you're talking about, like the slice of life stuff, that is, I mean. I don't want to say it's like a super new trend, but it is something that like we see more and more in comics. And that type of story really appeals to me, where it's just like exploring people through like a look at what their life is like. And it's kind
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
it's so atypical from what I grew up on, but it's very welcoming for me as a reader at least.
Hmm.
Were you interested? So it sounds like, because there was like a variety of options available to you when you were in Ringling and everything like that. Did you have interest in like the broader idea of storytelling before this one summer, or is it was it kind of like that opened up the option of illustration as storytelling for you?
Oh no, so even when I was, 4 or 5 years old, I was writing stories. Like I would actually get these sticker books for gifts when I was younger. Like I don't know what they were made of, like some kind of material that you could put stickers on and peel them back off again. And I would get them to collect stickers in, and I would just use them as storybooks. Like I would write and illustrate stories in them.
Yeah.
Um,
So you're kind of
I
making
remember,
like modified comics.
yeah, honestly, like when I was little, I kind of did that. Like I would write stories and illustrate them,
Yeah.
just for fun. I guess it was just a hobby, and I didn't really think of it as a comic book. I just
Sure.
thought of it as me writing a story and then drawing pictures to go along with it. And I I don't know when that stopped. I mean, I guess I didn't really do that too often throughout my later years, like middle school, high school. But it's funny, going through college, the number one compliment I got on my work was that it was so story driven.
Hmm.
Professors would tell me, like, you're able to capture an entire story within this one image. And I heard that so often, and I never really thought about what that could lead to. I would just thought, oh, like, yeah, my drawings are extraordinarily complicated. Like, I put in so much. I love detail, like really little details, and just making my illustrations way more complicated than they have to be. And so I just thought, okay, I'll just be like a really complex single illustrator. And but I kept hearing that over and over. And actually, so one other thing that kind of made me realize that graphic novels are where I'm supposed to be. I actually went to a lecture. I was living in Kansas City for a couple years, in
Hmm.
Kansas City, Missouri, after college, and I went to a lecture that Daniel Handler, who's the
Lemony
in
Snicket.
Alias is Lemony Snicket, yeah, and Brian Selznick, who does he did the Hugo Cabret, the invention of Hugo Cabret graphic
Hmm.
novel. They were giving a lecture on some of their new works, and we were able to go and have them sign things afterwards and have like a 1-minute conversation with them. And instead of taking like a book to sign, I wanted them to sign my sketchbook.
Oh,
So I took that up to them, and they were looking at, like, Brian Selznick was looking at the drawings, and he goes, you should try to get into graphic novels. Like, I can see you're a bit of a storyteller here. Like, you should maybe think about doing graphic novels. I was like, you're crazy. Like, I told Brian Selznick, like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And
was that before this one summer?
let me, I think that was like around the exact same time.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It was
That was a big
like I
period
found
for
this
you.
one summer. Yeah, it was like, I don't know, maybe all in August, like August 2015. Everyone just shoved the idea of graphic novels down my throat, and I still wouldn't listen.
So when after this one summer, I am like interested. Like, did you actually go from there and then consciously say, like, what else is there in these graphic novels, especially with like people like Brian Selznick being like, you should look at this. Like, did you start trying to pursue other comics to see if there was more out there like this one summer?
Oh no, absolutely not. I, I found the book, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'll just go back to reading my general fiction now. And I guess, I mean, a lot of times I fell in love with that book, and I just figured there wouldn't be anything else like it.
Sure.
Maybe I'm scared to take a risk, like, oh, let me try to see if I can find something as good as it, because maybe I'm afraid of like the letdown.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's nothing as good as this graphic novel. So yeah, I read that, and I think maybe I did actually look in to see what else Julian Tamaki had done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was maybe a couple months after that, maybe longer, that I read Skim,
Okay.
which was also by her. But yeah, as far as looking into other graphic novelists, I guess I was still in this mindset that I wouldn't enjoy it, even though I had loved This One Summer so much. I thought maybe This One Summer was the one exception.
Yeah, it was like the exception to the rule.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it wasn't until I was asked to do my first graphic novel that I realized how much more interested in the genre that I actually was.
So your first one was actually you provided art for an Anne of Green Gables graphic novel you did with Mariah Marsden. So how did that come together? Like, was that something? I mean, I just think it's interesting that, like, I imagine, like, it sounds like you were known for like the level of depth and storytelling within your illustration, but like, how did that somehow translate into you being hired for a graphic novel job despite not actually being actively interested in that? Like, it seems like another step in your, like, people really want you to do this pipeline.
Yeah, they wouldn't let me go. So I was working at Andrews McMeel Universal. It was a publishing company in Kansas City, so that's where I worked directly after college. Because I did love books, and I thought that getting my foot in the door in the publishing industry might open up my options to get into the book
illustration.
industry. Yeah, exactly. And there was a job opening actually for like a designer, but I went in and showed my portfolio, and they decided to create like an in-house illustrator position for me, so I could like start illustrating some of their covers and like interior illustrations and doing line art for some of their coloring books.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the editors had found a graphic novel called Primates, which is about like Jane Goodall and like it's the three women who study different primates. And they were thinking about readapting that, like reviving it, so making a new version. And there's something called acquisitions, which I'm not sure if everyone, like all the listeners, are aware, but in the publishing industry, they have a meeting to take ideas to the table and decide what they want to publish and what projects they want to work on within house. And so they brought Primates to the table, but the editor who approached me, she wanted to take some illustration examples just to make it seem more appealing, like to show the other editors in the meeting what the book might look like as a readapted graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that night I went home and just threw together a couple rough storyboards to show what it could look like as a new graphic novel, and they decided that it wasn't kind of the type of book that they would like a historical fiction or a historical nonfiction graphic novel is not what they would want to publish, but
Hmm.
they were really impressed by my work, and because they had seen my portfolio online, but they obviously had never seen any of my graphic novel work because I'd never done it before. And so they I don't really know what happened behind closed doors, but it was maybe a few weeks after that. Another editor who ended up being my first editor on the Anne of Green Gables project comes up to me at my desk and goes, "Hey, look, we really liked your work that you did for the acquisitions for primates. So we've been talking, and we'd really like to turn Anne of Green Gables into a graphic novel, and we'd like you to do the illustrations."
Oh my God.
And I was completely floored. Like, Anne of Green Gables had been one of my favorite stories of all time ever since I was little.
Hmm.
And like, somewhere at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, wait, I told myself I would never ever do this. Should I really say yes to this? But I mean, most, like 99% of me was thinking, this is the most incredible opportunity. How could I ever turn this down, especially for a story like Anne of Green Gables? And a lot of my hesitation was fear. Like, how can I do this? I've never tried this. I don't even know where to start. I have it has to be a 240 page book. How am I ever going to take 240 pages and make art on those pages? And it was just so overwhelming. But I still said yes with that fear. And yeah, so it was actually a project that I did not through my position. It was like an outside of work project.
Sure.
So yeah, that's how it kind of came to be.
I mean, that is one heck of a 0 to 60 in terms of going from like not even not having worked in comics, but it was just like you weren't interested in them. There was like one comic you'd ever read that you really liked. And so it's like, it wasn't like you had a huge amount of familiarity with the form to a significant degree. So, I mean, I have to imagine it was a lot, but what did you learn from that experience of working on Anne of Green Gables? And like during that process, was that when you realized that you really enjoyed the comic art form?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So, I mean, really, I learned to start listening to people more than I do.
You mean when they recommend working in
Realize,
comics?
yeah. um, I mean, doing that graphic novel, I learned more in art than I had all throughout college. I mean, not that I didn't learn so much from like incredible professors in college, but doing so much work in such a short amount of time, it really pushes you. So I was working my day job, and then I would actually come home and work on Anne of Green Gables all night, and then on the weekends. And so it was just like art constantly, and it completely absorbed my life. But I probably the most important thing I learned really was how much I love it, because when you're doing something that is 99% of your time and it completely usurps everything, like you have to make so many sacrifices, other things that you love, to do this full time. And it really just proves to me how much I love it, because I wouldn't give it up for anything. So even when it gets incredibly stressful and overwhelming, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. So that's how I knew that graphic novel is exactly what I should be working on, because I just fell in love with it so much. And it was difficult for me because I'm used to working on a single illustration with a lot of detail.
Mm.
And instead, this is kind of like a bunch of less detailed illustrations all put together. I still am probably overly detailed with each panel. So I still like maintain that love of detail in the illustrations, but I learned to kind of work a little bit differently, like to focus on a single thing within each illustration, like focusing on the emotion or the action, or realizing what one or two things I had to think about and like make the audience read in each individual panel rather than putting everything into it. And I'm sorry, what was the last question?
Oh no, I was just basically, did you learn to love comics during that, which you have definitely answered. But
Oh yeah.
I think the one of my favorite things about your work and about Sheets in of itself is like, I'm not saying that nobody in comics does this, but I kind of feel like because you come from a different perspective and you're not kind of beholden to the way that comics have always been done, that you do things like slightly differently than we normally would expect. Like you have within Sheets, there's like a number of like either two double page kind of spreads or like single page spreads that are really just kind of there. I mean, I don't want to, say why you were doing them or your intent on those pages, but to me, they're like total pace changers and they like slow things down and they have like a lot of establishing of the world. Like early on in Sheets, there's a page of Marjorie Glatt, the main character, walking down the street, and the only words on it are "sometimes I feel less visible than that," and the rest of it is just showing Glatt's laundry and showing another building next to it, and a green car, and a hole in a tree, and et cetera, et cetera. But it's like the way that you use that just like slows down the pace, but also like really because Marjorie feels so small in this shot, it kind of like underlines like the loneliness that she's feeling, and all of that stuff to me is like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know if you'd been going for comics the whole time, if you would look at a page or like a double page spread and you're just like, I'm going to do it this way, because you might have expected, I don't know. It's like, because comics are always done one way and you didn't have that background, maybe you approach things in a slightly different way than another comic artist might. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And actually, that's funny you say that too, because even throughout college, I was kind of the girl who avoided looking at other illustrators. Like a lot of my fellow students were really into doing a ton of research on their favorite illustrators and with the masters, and spending so many hours looking through illustration books and finding new work. And I was just never really into that. Like I didn't want any influence. I mean, I certainly understand the benefits of like learning from the professionals, and I certainly made an attempt to do that, but I guess I feared my work becoming less original by observing too many other people's work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if it's safe to always stay in a bubble like I do, but sometimes I do kind of like shutting out inspiration just so I can keep it within my own mind, like how I think things should be, rather than being influenced by how other people see it.
Sure. I mean, if you start taking in all this, I mean, and I'm not saying, again, like you're saying, neither of us are saying that influences are bad or anything like that. But at the same time, it's like, even if you spend all your time like looking through other books and everything like that, sometimes it may influence the way, like it may change the way that you yourself approach stories away from your own voice without you really thinking about it. And like, that's like, it's not a bad thing, but it could take away from who you are as an illustrator. And like, I don't know, I appreciate that you kind of bubble up to a certain degree, because it results in a comic that like reads much differently than almost anything else in the stands.
Well, thank you. And I actually, you might have read this in another interview, but I kind of see myself less of an illustrator or graphic novelist. I'd like to kind of consider myself as a director.
Oh, sure.
In me, kind of, because I kind of see graphic novels as like the written and illustrated form of a film.
Sure.
Because it is sort of a shot by shot, sort of like they would do a storyboard for an animated film. And so a lot of it is me kind of directing my characters and capturing an emotion and a feeling and the action. And so like when you said that, like how Marjorie feels really small in that shot, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like it was less about drawing something to go along with the words and more about like capturing how Marjorie was feeling in that moment.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I really love it, and I like that director idea. Another thing that you do that I really like is that, I've talked to people before who like are artists who get into writing, and like one of the kind of cliches, but I think it's kind of or stereotypes about people who start in more on the illustration side of things and then get into like handling their own stories and everything like that, is that quite often they'll overwrite and like they'll put too much in out of fear of like being, I don't know, like favoring art or something like that. I'm not really sure exactly the reasoning for that, but that's just like this common idea that happens. But like your director view is really a good perspective, because it's like it seems like you're not really afraid to like have panels that are just art and like let those just like resonate, because like you can tell the emotion that's happening with the character and everything like that. Like there's the sequence where they're at the pool, where Marjorie's at the pool, and like there's this whole section where like you can see I think it's Colton is diving, and like everybody else is like just kind of doing their own thing, and it's just kind of like checking in with everybody. But I like that you don't seem afraid of like letting the art speak first.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I actually, when I'm working on a graphic novel, I start completely with the words. So I never do any drawing except for maybe some character studies until the entire script is written and edited.
Mm-hmm.
So, but as I'm writing the script, I am sort of seeing the whole thing in my head. So I'm picturing the moments that I do want to be those quiet moments, just to capture a feeling without words. And those are my favorite parts to illustrate, actually, without any words, because I feel like I can really step into the characters there and not be guided by what I've written. But like a moment like the pool, I would sort of imagine, okay, like pretend I'm Marjorie. What is she experiencing in this moment? And for me, I see a lot of myself in Marjorie, because like I too hate gym class. So it was really easy for me to picture the agony of what she's going through in a gym class and put that onto paper.
Yeah. I feel like gym class is like the pinnacle of like judgment. Even though I think everyone is quietly like just worried about being judged for the most part, it's like there's just this really weird emotion tied up with gym class that you wouldn't think would come with this whole idea of like this is supposed to be fun and games, but in reality it's like this is where the judgment comes.
Exactly. And then there are the people who enjoy gym class, and they're the worst kind of people.
Oh man, I do like some gym class stuff, but in Alaska, I cannot do winter sports. The only time I ever do winter sports is basically solely so I can injure myself. And in Alaska schools, they always make you do winter sports like cross country skiing, and I just can't do it. It's just like a good way for me to like fall over while having sticks attached to my feet. It's very problematic. Yo, everybody. I want to take a second to talk about my friends at TKO Studios. TKO Studios is a new comic publisher that launched with what the New York Times calls an impressive slate of talent. They publish books by top creators, including Roxane Gay, Jeff Lemire, Garth Ennis, Gabriel Walta, and many more. TKO also does things differently than other publishers. They binge release their books and offer each title in whatever format you most enjoy reading your comics in, whether that's a 6-issue set in a collector's box, trade paperback, or digital download. I'm a single issues guy, so I went that route and I love the collector's box. Even better, all of TKO's first issues are free to read at tkopresents.com right now. So if you're curious, visit tkopresents.com to give them a try, or follow at TKO Presents across all social platforms. And if you're a store that's interested in stocking TKO's books, email retailers at tkopresents.com to learn more about one of the best retailer deals in the industry. And now, back to the show. Well, so you did Anne of Green Gables. From what I understand, Sheets started as a school project. Like, how did this whole book start coming together? Like, what was its development process like?
Yeah, so I was taking a course in my senior year of college called Writing Children's Books. And so one of our assignments was to develop a middle grade novel. So basically we had to come up with characters and develop, very, very fully develop them, like their likes and dislikes, their goals, what they hate, just go deeply into who they are. We had to create like a protagonist, like a sidekick, and then the antagonist. And that we had to think about the book's themes and the conflicts and basically do all that underground work. And then by the end of the course, we had to write the first two chapters of this novel. And so she started in this class. Like the characters I created were Marjorie, Wendell, and Mr. Saubertuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course it was very different from what it is today. But it was still like the idea of like the ghost in the laundromat showing up and wreaking havoc in Marjorie Glatz's life. And so yeah, it started as just a chapter book for kids. And so after I finished Anne of Green Gables, I fell in love with graphic novels and realized, okay, this is something that I actually do want to do. I thought back to that story that I had started in college and thought I might give it a try, like see what would happen if I tried turning it into a graphic novel manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started working on that just in my free time. And actually the editor of Anne of Green Gables, she ended up leaving Andrew Smith Mille Universal and moving to Lion Forge. Her name's Andrea Colvin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kept in contact with her, and I sent her actually a query letter that I was going to send to an agent, so he would be able to send this new manuscript around. And when I sent her this query letter, she came back to me and was like, "Would you mind just sending me the manuscript?" And I was like, okay, sure. So they actually ended up taking that to acquisitions at Lion Forge, and that's how She's got acquired, was because of this connection I had with Andrea.
That is amazing. I just, it's funny. I love that this all involves Daniel Handler / like Lemony Snicket, because, not to be too cheesy, but it really feels like a series of fortunate events that kind of ended up resulting in you being in graphic novels.
I know it was complete fate. Like, no matter how hard I tried,
it was inescapable.
Yeah, exactly.
That is amazing. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like I've talked to a lot of people about their breaking in stories, and like I think your story is kind of, a perfect example as to why breaking in stories can, in some ways, like not be super useful, because it's like no one could recreate your process to get into comics. It's like it's impossible.
Yeah. And honestly, sometimes I feel a little guilty because I know that some people have been so obsessed with comics their entire life and have dedicated nothing else but to pursue this. And I'm sitting here like, oh, geez, please don't make me do this ever. And then here I am, like it's not handed to me. I mean, I worked extremely hard to get there, but it was eventually. It found me.
Sure.
And it's sometimes hard to feel like I'm worthy of doing this. I mean, even though I've worked so hard, I was never really interested in it before, but I think that, I mean, now there's been a complete switch. Like, I read graphic novels constantly, and I love what I'm doing. Like, I know this is exactly where I was supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, like not to try to like do amateur diagnosis or something like that, but I mean, I think everybody in comics gets that like imposter syndrome feeling where it's just like, I don't know if I deserve this. I don't know if it's that, but I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm like, everyone kind of approach, if they end up becoming a comic book fan, it's like a lot of times they kind of come into their own way, like come into it in their own path. And like when they become a creator, sometimes that happens too. I mean, if I remember correctly, like Stan Lee didn't like really, he didn't like invent or co-create the Fantastic Four until he was like in his 40s. And so it's like, there's all these really, really disparate paths that people come in. So it's like, I don't know. I really feel like there's no one way to do this. And it's like, Like again,
Right.
like I think your story is perfect proof of that being the case.
Hmm. Yeah.
I have to ask, just because you are a Tamaki fan, have you read Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up with Me yet?
I have not. No.
I bet you'll love it
No. But
because Rosemary Valero O'Connell draws that, and she has a similar love of like robust landscapes and like environments and stuff like that. Like not on every panel, but like when she gets into it, you're just like, oh my god, this feels so lived in. It's incredible.
I know that is definitely on my to read list. I've been seeing it online.
It's a good one, but well, it makes sense to me that Sheets kind of started with that trio with Marjorie and Wendell and Mr. Sabertuck, just because those three kind of feel like the most like fully realized characters of the lot. But I did want to start with like Marjorie and Wendell's relationship because it's an interesting one because like I told you before, I actually first read a Sheets story, which is the Free Comic Book Day comic that you did that came out in like in May for Free Comic Book Day, and then went back and read Sheets. And it's funny because when I read a Sheets story, it's like their relationship is like super tight from the start. It like, you know, you read it and you're just like, oh, this is like the most important person in Marjorie's life, despite the fact that it is a literal ghost. And
Yeah.
but when you read Sheets, it's like it's a like it's an evolving relationship that doesn't necessarily start or even like follow up like after that start in on a good foot. Like how did that relationship develop? Because it sounds like when you originally had it, like he was kind of the sidekick. Like how did it go from being that to being what it was in Sheets?
Right. So, I mean, really, I wanted to write about these two people feeling very out of place in their own worlds. So, despite the fact that there's the land of ghosts and the land of humans, and the land of ghosts is a dreary, monochrome land, and they have like the barely bubblegum shampoo, and everything's really sad. And so Wendell, he's kind of the outcast in this world, and all the other ghosts make fun of him, and he really hates the fact that he has to be dead. It's kind of morbid, but he's looking back and realizing that like how much he's going to be missing. But meanwhile, Marjorie, who's in the land where Wendell wants to be, is just as alone and friendless and the outcast. And so I wanted to show that, no matter where you are, you can still be in the same situation. And it's kind of about learning to make the best of whatever situation you're in. And so I really wanted the two of them to find each other
Mm-hmm.
because they have, like, even though they're complete opposites, like, Marjorie's alive and Wendell's a ghost, they are so similar despite how different their situations are. And so really the end goal was finding the friendship between them. And I just wanted it to take a while to get there, because a lot of times you don't really realize what you need until it's been around for a while. So Wendell, of course, like he is causing a lot of problems throughout the book for Marjorie, and at first she doesn't even really know who is causing the problem. She doesn't even realize that there is a ghost in her laundromat. So yeah, like the story was kind of like just this build up for them finding each other and realizing that despite causing problems, that he can be forgiven because they have so much in common and they need each other.
Yeah. I love, like, one of my favorite moments in the whole book is like you do a very good job of, and I'm not going to say exactly what this entails, but it's like the reveal of who like Wendell is relative to Marjorie is like such a perfect moment. I mean, it's not even this huge moment. It's not like he's like the long lost brother of like Marjorie or something like that. But it's like
Yeah.
I tried to explain it to my wife, and I think I did probably the single worst job of explaining that in the history of explaining anything. And she's like, "Oh, that sounds nice, David." I'm like, God, I'm bad at this. But I did want to ask about Wendell from an art perspective, because character acting is not something that everybody necessarily excels at, but you're very good with your character acting, whether it's Marjorie or Mr. Sabertuck or whomever. Like, I really love Mr. Sabertuck's varying yoga poses. He is very into his yoga, and he's like, you do a very good job with him. But Wendell is a really interesting character from a character acting standpoint because he is incredibly charming, but he is a literal sheet. Like, how do you like what went into like figuring out how to bring that character to life? Because it's not something you can find a lot of photo. I mean, I guess you could make photo reference. You could just get under a sheet, but still.
I did that. I sat underneath the sheet and I tried so hard to make poses with my arms beneath the sheet. I mean, of course, when you're like making poses with your arms underneath the sheet, it's just hidden by the sheet.
Right.
So you kind of had to grab the sheets in really weird ways, and like when Wendell's arms are crossed. I mean, it took a lot of effort. Like, there are so many really embarrassing photos in my photo booth on my computer
Oh, that's
of
incredible.
me struggling to make these poses as a sheet ghost. Um, so yeah, there was a lot of that. I mean, a lot of it was just looking at just a human pose and then trying to mimic that with a sheet. And then of course, you always hear like eyebrows are such an important thing to express emotion.
Yeah.
And so I kind of use like the eyebrows like a crease or a fold in the sheet to help enhance his emotions, and that helps a lot for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean you did a phenomenal job. It is really funny though because it's just like he wears his emotion. Well, God, I was going to say on his sleeves, and I was like, what if I said emotions on his sheets? And I'm like, oh, that's too stupid. But I mean, it's true. It's just
No,
like
it's perfect.
his eyes are just like really expressive, and it's funny because they're just like black holes, like you'd expect from a ghost in a sheet. But at the same time, it's like they just say a lot. And I don't know, it was funny because I was thinking about it. I was like, how did she figure this out? And I never once considered, did she just take a bunch of funny pictures of her underneath sheets? And that was the answer. What about with Marjorie? Because it's like, I think that there's like this real authenticity to like her loneliness and how she carries herself. It's like there's this one shot I think where she's kind of like holding her elbow with one of her hands and she's like looking down, and it's like I feel like I recognized myself in that moment, not to get too dark or anything like that, but it's just like it's this quintessentially like as soon as you see that you're like this person is like going through some stuff emotionally. It's like, did you have to, I mean, put yourself into a certain place to imagine what that was like, or was there like maybe a little bit of yourself in Marjorie so you kind of could perceive yourself in that position?
Honestly, yeah, like there is so much of me and Marjorie, and like I don't want to get dark here either, but like I was definitely going through a lot of really dark things when I was in college, and started with the story, and even like throughout working, like while I was working on sheets, I was struggling with a lot of like heavy emotions, but uh, I really like delving into people's characters. Like, I mean, I actually am really into the theater. Like,
Sure.
community theater is one of my hobbies. So putting myself in other character shoes is something that I love doing anyway. So like, I've never, I have not lost my mom, and I can't even imagine how difficult that must be. So to be able to capture that, I really had to just take the like any negative emotions I'd felt, like any sadness, and try to put that onto Marjorie. Like, even though it's not the same kind of sadness, it is still like a negative, heavy emotion. So I did try to use what I knew
Like some common
to
ground.
help. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I think you did an exceptional job. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, for people who like, not to get too deep or anything like that, but I have like, I've had losses in my family and everything like that. And so going through that and like seeing what Marjorie's father was going through and like kind of like the innocence of her brother who doesn't quite understand everything that's going on. It's like, as somebody who went through things like that, it rang very true for me. And I was just like, dang, this is like, very impressive. Apparently, the community theater stuff is really like you really took to community theater and to comic books. So good job by you.
And that's so great to hear. Like, I love hearing when people can relate to it and connect to it. I mean, even though it's upsetting that it's something that you have to relate to, but I actually my boyfriend's mom is a teacher,
Hmm.
and one of the students in her class, I guess, felt a connection with Marjorie and the relationship she has with her father, and because she could recognize a lot of the traits um, in her own father that Marjorie's father had. So it's like she took this difficult thing and realized like, oh, Marjorie's going through this too. Like now I have this character I can turn to, who's going through something similar that I might be experiencing. So it's like when kids can have a difficult situation expressed in an art form, a book or a movie or whatever, it gives them someone to not look up to, but like to have a friend, like
So you can
a
take strength from
fictional
them.
friend in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's really tremendous how you do that. I mean, and I think going back to the slice of life stuff, it's like if you look at somebody like Raina Telgemeier, and obviously Raina's stuff, I mean, isn't necessarily like if you read Smile, for example, it's not like going to dark places or anything like that. But I've had I've tried to suggest to people that I know that read comics to read it, and they're just like it's like a book for kids. I'm like, my thing I always say about Smile is like if you have teeth, you'll probably understand what this story is all about and the emotions that go through it, because it's like, and also the good news is everybody has teeth, so it works very well for people. But it's just like there's something universal there, and I think with your book, while everybody hasn't necessarily went through that, it's like you can see yourself in those emotions and like the loneliness that it's like what is that the whole thing, it's like being like lonely in a crowd and everything like that. That's like kind of Marjorie's
Yeah.
life, is like she's, I don't know. It is. She's kind of a remarkable character, mostly in the sense that, like, a lot of times I think when people go through real trauma like that, they'll shut down, like her father did. But instead, she just basically has to run her entire family, and it's quite the journey for her.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, she is a tough character, and it's kind of, I think it's one of those situations where there's really not another option. Like
Sure.
sometimes you just have to work through it because there's literally nothing else you can do. Because in order to keep her family working, I mean, like in order to keep them living in this place, like she had to be the one to do things. She had to be the one to take care of things, and of course, she was really close to her mom, like this strong woman. And I think that she took a lot of that strength and realized like, okay, I can do this now too, because no one else can. And so she's definitely strong, but I think a lot of that strength was forced upon her.
Yeah. So I did want to talk about your colors a little bit, because there's some really interesting color choices in it. Like there's a lot of pinks and a lot of reds and blues, and it's like a lot of contrasting colors. But one of the things I also think is really interesting is like there's like the flashback of when Marjorie goes to Spinny's pumpkin farm in there. And it's funny when she's
Hmm.
looking back, quite often there's like a real contrast color, but it's a lot warmer than it is throughout the rest of the book. Like when you use color, like what are you trying to do with like conveying mood and everything like that? Did you have a specific approach on how you wanted to use color to, I guess, represent the different timelines of the book, and also like the different environments, like the land of the ghosts?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first decision was like the book as a whole. I mean, this takes place in the 90s,
Hmm.
so I definitely wanted to have like a nostalgic feel. So a lot of like those pinks and purples and pastels,
Like Trapper Keepers.
but also yeah, yeah, and then just thinking about like a laundromat and like the softness, and like the pinks and the very light pale blues just had that sort of a clean, fresh laundry sort of feel. So that was really my first thoughts. Um, and then for contrast, I wanted the Land of the Ghosts to be very grim. Just like the dark purple and the gray, to really contrast the Land of the Humans. Um, and then for the flashback, so all I really did was change the line color.
Oh.
One thing I really like to do in my art is like make colored lines,
Hmm.
which really changes the entire look of, or like actually like the a different mood of the drawing. So I use like the warm reddish brown
Hmm.
line for the flashbacks, and which made it that like you said a lot warmer. Because looking back in time, I guess when Marjorie still has her mom and things are a lot happier in their family situation. So yeah, that was definitely a conscious choice to make the flashbacks just a little bit more cheerful, and also to distinguish between the timelines. Like readers would recognize, okay, this is a different moment in time.
For sure. Well, I just have a few more questions. And one of them I want to ask about is like, well, it's not even really a question. I just want to say that Ghostwriter is probably like the greatest creation in the history of fiction, because I am so famous amongst my friend group for spilling on myself that like during a wedding speech by the maid of honor in my friend group, they compared, like, she was trying to find like famous couples throughout history, and she like listed off some famous couples and then said David Harper and Spills as the last one, which gained a very large laugh because everyone knew what she meant. And so like Ghostwriter is like I wish that existed so bad, because there's so often where I'm like, I buy a pair of pants and then I get home and I'm like, I'm gonna have ice cream, and I spill on myself instantaneously. I guess like this isn't even a realistic question, but I mean, it's just like, where did that enter into the process? Because I think it was such a neat solution at the end, but it's like, it's perfect. It's genius.
So actually, that was something that I thought of at the very end of the course I took in college.
Okay.
Because for the resolution, like I needed
a way to tie those two things together.
Yeah, like I needed a reason for Wendell to save the day. Like he's caused so much trauma for Marjorie and her family, like unintentionally,
right?
But still has caused a lot of problems. And like, in order for him to be welcome into her life and redeem himself, he kind of needed a way to help them save their business. So I was like, what could a laundromat use that would help them? And it's like, what if they could get rid of all the stains on everything? Because really, I was thinking, like, wouldn't that be great if I could have it too?
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, so if there was something that could get rid of stains on sheets, what would that be in a ghost world? I'm like, well, what about ghost shampoo?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how that came to be.
But Ghostwriter is such a good name. It's just like, it rolls off the tongue really nicely. It's like, I don't know, it's perfect. Like as soon as I read that, I was like, this is genius.
It was like a combination of like ghost and moisturizer.
Right. Which is funny because I'm like, I'm trying to imagine putting moisturizer on my clothes. I'm like, this would turn out very poorly.
Yeah, but like ghost do, like a combination of like ghost shampoo or like sham
sure.
Ghost. It just doesn't work.
No, it works perfectly. It's amazing. Well, so like I said, I discovered the book through the Free Comic Book Day comic. Was that, how did that come together? Because it was like, it's like a great trailer for, I don't know. It's kind of like a funny thing because it's like, it takes place after the main story. Is that part of Delicates? Like, is that, or I guess like, here's my question about the Free Comic Book Day book. Is it a standalone story, or is that like a snippet from Delicates, the sequel that's supposed to come out in 2020?
It's actually completely standalone. So, so after I finished Sheets and I started working on Delicates, my editor, like Andrea Colvin, she approached me with the opportunity of illustrating like a mini sheet story for the Free Comic Book Day. And I mean, I had thought of nothing. Like she was like, hey, do you just want to write like a short spin-off Marjorie and Wendell adventure? I'm like, sure. So I had to kind of think, what would happen with them after they become friends now. And the Free Comic Book Day was happening around Mother's Day this year. So I was thinking, now that Marjorie doesn't have a mom, what would she do for Mother's Day? And I thought, well, maybe her grandmother is still alive, so maybe they go and visit her.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was just a complete spin-off story. That is none of that will be in Delicates.
Yeah, I just thought it was really smart because it was like a nice gateway for people who hadn't discovered it yet to like jump back and buy Sheets. It's like, if you like a Sheets story, well, good news, Sheets is already out, so you can buy it right now. And I do want to say, I actually bought this book in Portland, Oregon. I was down in they have this big bookstore called Powell's Books there. And it is like
I have heard all about Powell's Books.
Oh, it is
I've
glorious.
Heard great things.
And I will tell you what, I have good news for you. They know you because I said I was like trying to find sheets, and I was like, hey, I was in their graphic novel section. I was like, do you know where I can find this? And they're like, oh yeah, we know that book. It's like it's down in the all ages section. They told me exactly where it was, and they're like, yeah, we have a lot of it. And there was just like sheets after sheets after sheets, and I was like, I think they're heavily in the Brenna Thummler business.
Oh my gosh, it's so wonderful to hear.
Yeah, it was really great. I was like, I don't know. They were like, yeah, I think we have like 8 of them, and I was just like, that seems like a lot. And I went down there. I was like, wow, you have a lot of this book. And now I realize why. But in regards to delicates, though, it's kind of interesting because Sheets very easily could be a standalone book. It could be like the one story about Marjorie and about Wendell and everything like that. And I just want to say, like, the last 5 pages of the book are just like perfect. They're just like completely perfect when she and Wendell run into the water, with all the shared meaning of what that means to them, and then kind of showing what life is like afterwards, and like a single page like of looks at what life in their town is like now. It's just it's really well done. Like, that could have been the end. Why did you end up deciding to do Delicates, like a sequel to this book?
Right. So actually, Delicate is going to be very, very different.
Okay.
So the whole ghost laundromat. I mean, they're like Marjorie they still have a laundromat, but that is not at all the focus of this book. This book is actually more about kind of the delicate nature of life.
Sure.
And so there's a new character in this book named Eliza, and she is now sort of the bullied. She's kind of the victim of the story, because now like Marjorie, they're in 8th grade now, and she's sort of starting to gain popularity, and it's like a very, very different tone.
Sure.
So it's more exploring like not to give too much away,
Sure,
but
sure.
There's like a lot of dark thoughts happening in this book, and wondering like what would it be like to be a ghost.
Oh, okay.
And so it's kind of like looking more at school bullying and that dynamic, because like Mr. Sourtuck, he's not even in this book. Like he got
chased
villain
out.
is actually he's gone for good. So it's now Tessie Waffleton. She is now the antagonist of this book. So it's a lot of like this like 8th grade culture, and mostly focusing on like school bullying.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very different dynamic.
So it's like
sequel.
It's like it's the same characters. It's just more exploring what their life is like afterwards and all the things that come with. I mean, I have to admit, like, as much as like high school is a house of horrors for most people, like middle school was by far like the worst part for me. I was like 7th grade was horrible, and 8th grade.
Oh yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah, 7th grade was the worst. It was like going from elementary school to middle school. I was just like, oh, this is just terrible. There's so many more people. I don't know anybody. I spent like my entire life getting to know these people. I know these people, where they go. But yeah. So I'm sure that's a fertile ground. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I do want to close with one question that has nothing to do with Sheets. I told you I was going to bring this up because you and I both love peanut butter. It is actually in your, I believe it's in your write-up about the author in the back of it, the back of the book.
Oh yeah, I put it in like pretty much every biography I have.
So, okay, now a couple questions. Let's start with the basics. In the book, you feature creamy peanut butter. What is your allegiance, creamy or crunchy?
Oh, creamy. Crunchy is the devil.
Oh my God, I have to hang up now because I am team crunchy. I go extra crunchy if it's available. I love the crunch. So what is it about peanut butter that makes it bioworthy? Because it seems like, I mean, I think on your website you even say something along the lines of, when you moved to Kansas City, it was good because their peanut butter was still good, or something like that, or like it didn't change too much. Like, what is it that makes that like such a beloved thing for you?
I think it's just a good go-to thing. Like, I mean, as far as especially any kind of dessert, Like I'm really bad at making decisions. Like I am a terrible, terrible decision maker. So if I go to a restaurant that I've never been to and look at their menu, I can barely do it. Like I can barely get through the meal because I have to decide something to eat.
Sure.
And so when I'm choosing a dessert somewhere, if there's something with chocolate and peanut butter on the menu, that's what I get. So it's kind of like, I don't know if it's just what's easy, but I know that I love it dearly. So it's just the choice that I turn to.
Sure. Well, I have like, I have peanut butter theories, which is like one of the dumbest things I've ever said on here, but whatever, I'm gonna say it anyways. Like, I think to a certain degree when you're like an adult, it's like when you get into that position, there's like simple things like foods, like peanut butter or something like that harken back to the safety of childhood. It's like, have you seen Ratatouille?
I have not.
Okay.
No.
Well, there's this one scene in that movie where basically a character tastes something and it immediately brings them back to a moment where they felt safe in the world. And it's like, I think to a certain degree for me, for like peanut butter, it's like I have peanut butter and it's just like I feel like warm and fuzzy and safe, and it just reminds me of my childhood because like peanut butter when I grew up as a kid, I was like super picky to the point where my parents like thought that I didn't like eating meat because I was lazy. And which is like a ridiculous thing, but it's an actual thing that they thought. But I love peanut butter in like every form. And so it's like sometimes I wonder if the reason why I love it so much is because it has like this like nostalgic hole in my heart that will always exist.
Now that I think about it, I'm not really sure that, I mean, I definitely had peanut butter as a kid, but it was not my go-to. Like I was mostly more like meat and cheese sandwiches, I feel like. So the first time that I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich was college.
Oh, wow.
I had never had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich until I was in college, and it was terrible. It completely ruined peanut butter. I don't want
So peanut butter and jelly's out. The sandwich is out.
Oh, it's out. Oh,
that's
yeah.
amazing.
Tried it once, never again.
So your preferred peanut butter delivery device is dessert?
Like either plain peanut butter sandwich?
No. I'm saying your preferred way to have peanut butter is like through dessert. Is that your preference?
Oh,
or just like spoonfuls?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would definitely eat a spoonful of peanut butter if asked.
Sure.
But it's probably not something that I would choose to do.
Okay. I love that you have these like things that are very important to you that you actually kind of came into like late at life. It's like comics and peanut butter are like bio-worthy things, but at the same time you're like you only got into them in college or like later, and that's amazing. I mean, people keep finding themselves. Life goes on.
Yeah, maybe in childhood I just loved nothing.
And I don't know. I mean, like I said, when I was a kid, I was like super picky. And then when I got, I don't know, probably about college, I think I had like Hawaiian food for the first time, and it just opened the door to everything. And now I actually think that I love every food. And my wife constantly tells me that I'm just fibbing about that. But at the same time, I feel like it's like at least partially true because I really love food. But
food is great.
It is. But Brenna, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and talking sheets, your story, peanut butter, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. This is great, and I had lots of fun, and I hope that your readers or listeners enjoy this.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Brenna Thummler. You can find her on Twitter at Brenna Thummler, on her website at brennathummler.com, and her work in the excellent graphic novel Sheets. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show in there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, following it on Twitter at @SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Nathan House, Litwin Studios, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kangas, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Gibb, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwand, Connor Farner, Beta Ayala, JDC and Matt Gagnon, Aditya Bidikar, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockard, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Nassie, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Ira James Udaskin, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Phil Null, Ian Maxfield, Clip Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Dominacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening and tune in next week for another episode.